Chapter 3. Kidnapped, Ruth Rose shrieked. Her blue eyes were huge. Josh and Dink covered their ears. Shh, said Josh. He handed the letter back to Dink and gave a quick gesture with his head. Some strange woman's watching us. Dink noticed the woman earlier. She had been sitting in the back of the book nook. She's coming over here, Ruth Rose said. The woman had brown hair up in a neat bun. This must be her. Oh, I remember seeing her in the last chapter. Half glasses perched on her nose. She was wearing a brown dress and brown shoes and carried a book bag with a picture of a moose on the side. Around her neck, she wore a red scarf covered with tiny black letters. Now, you know what? I would stop right here and I would put a little post-it note here or get out my reader's notebook and I would write down in my clues section in my journal and I would write down some of these things that would describe what she has with her. This might come back to help us. Excuse me, she said in a soft, trembly voice. Did you say Wallace has been kidnapped? The woman poked her glasses nervously. Dink wasn't sure what to say. He thought Wallace had been kidnapped, but he couldn't say for sure. Finally, he said, well, he might have been. My goodness, gasped the woman. Who are you? Josh asked her. Oh, pardon me. The woman blushed. My name is Mavis Green, she mumbled. I'm a writer, and I came to meet Mr. Wallace. Dink said, I'm Duncan Duncan. I'm Dink Duncan. These are my friends Ruth Rose and Josh. Mavis shook hands shyly. Then she reached into her book bag and pulled out a folded paper. Wallace wrote me last week. He said something very peculiar in his letter, and I didn't think much of it at the time, but when he didn't show up today and I heard you mention kidnapping, and she handed the letter to Dink. Josh and Ruth Rose read it over his shoulder. Dear Mavis, thank you for your note. I'm well, and thank you for asking, but lately my imagination is playing tricks on me. I think I'm being followed. Maybe that's what happens to mystery writers. We start seeing the bad guys in the shadows. Well, at any rate, I'm eager to meet you in Greenlawn, and I look forward to our lunch after the signing. Oh, I think I might know what happened next. Wow, said Ruth Rose. First he says he's being followed, and then he winds up missing. Dink told Mavis about his letter from Wallace, and he said the only thing that would keep him from coming today is if he was kidnapped. Oh dear, said Mavis. I just don't understand why anyone would want to kidnap Wallace. Well, if he's the most famous mystery writer in the world, he must be rich, right? Said Josh. Maybe someone kidnapped him for a ransom. Suddenly, Josh grabbed Dink and spun him around, pointing toward the street. Look, the cops are coming. They must have heard us talk about the kidnapping. A police officer was walking toward them. Josh, that's just Officer Fallon. Jimmy Fallon's grandfather, said Dink. Jimmy came to get a book signed, and I saw him inside the book nook. Maybe we should show Officer Fallon these letters, Ruth Rose suggested. They could be clues if Wallace really is kidnapped. Who's been kidnapped? Asked Officer Fallon, who was now standing near them. Not my grandson, I hope, he added, grinning. Dink showed Officer Fallon the two letters. We think Wallace might have been kidnapped, he said. He promised he'd come to sign the books, but he isn't here. Officer Fallon read Mavis's letter first, then Dink's, and he scratched his chin and handed the letters back. Well, the letters do sound a bit suspicious, he said, but it's more likely that Mr. Wallace just missed his flight. Jimmy Fallon ran out of the book nook, waving a Wallace book at his grandfather. Grandpa, he never came. Can we go for ice cream anyway? Officer Fallon put a big hand on Jimmy's head. In a minute, son, he said. To Dink, he said, I wouldn't worry, Mr. Wallace will turn up. Call me tomorrow if there's no news, okay? They watched Jimmy and his grandfather walk away. Dink handed Mavis the letter back to her and folded his and slid it into his pocket. Crazy thoughts were bouncing around in his head. What if Wallace Wallace really has been kidnapped? It hasn't happened because I invited him to Greenlawn. I'm practically an accomplice. I don't want to wait till tomorrow, he said finally. I say we start looking for Wallace Wallace now. Well, where do we start? Ruth Rose asked. Dink jerked his thumb over his shoulder. Right here at the book nook. Excuse me, Mavis Green said shyly. May I come along too? Sure, Dink said. He marched back inside the book nook with the others following. Mr. Paskey was putting the Wallace Wallace books back on the shelf. He looked even more nervous than before. Excuse me, Mr. Paskey, Dink said. Have you heard from Wallace Wallace? Oops, sorry, guys. Mr. Paskey's hand shot up to his bow tie. No, Dink, not a word. We think he was kidnapped, Josh said. Mr. Paskey swallowed, making his bow tie wiggle. Now, Joshua, let's not jump to any conclusions. I'm sure there's a rational explanation for his absence. Dink told Mr. Paskey about the 2 letters. I'm really worried, Mr. Paskey. Where could he be? Mr. Paskey took out a handkerchief and wiped his face. I have no idea. He removed the paper from his desk and handed it to Dink. All I have is his itinerary. And then that word itinerary is popping up there. I might need to write that one down as kind of a tricky word for me. I think it might have to do with, oh, wait, take a look. It's kind of like a schedule. It's got times on it. Yeah, okay, so an itinerary must be a schedule. The others looked at Dink's shoulder as he read. Itinerary for Wallace Wallace. Number 1, arrive at Bradley Airport at 7 o'clock p.m., Friday, July 15th. New England Airlines Flight 3132. Number 2, meet the driver from Lawrence Taxi Service. Number 3, drive to Shangri-La Hotel. Number 4, sign books at Book Nook at 11 a.m., Saturday, July 16th. And number 5, lunch, then back to airport for a 4:30 p.m. flight. This is definitely a clue. I would definitely tuck this away for sure. Can I keep this? Dink asked Mr. Paskey. Mr. Paskey blinked. Well, I guess it'll be all right, but why do you need the itinerary? Dink picked up a marker and drew circles around the words airport, taxi, hotel, Book Nook. This is like a trail. It leads from the airport last night to the Book Nook today, Dink said. Somewhere along this trail, Wallace Wallace disappeared. Dink stared at the itinerary, and we're going to find him. So I wonder if they are going to find him. Let's take a look at Chapter 4. Mr. Paskey shooed them out of the Book Nook and locked the front door. I have to eat lunch, he said, and he scurried down Main Street. You know, Mr. Paskey, man, he just keeps on coming back as very suspicious because he's always like, kind of like anxious and nervous, and he locked the door quickly here. I don't know. Things just don't add up for him. Come on, Dink said. There's a phone in Ellie's diner. Good, we can eat while you're calling. Calling? Josh stopped. Who are you calling? The airport, Dink said, to see if Wallace Wallace was on that 7 o'clock flight last night. They walked to Ellie's diner just as Jimmy Fallon and his grandfather came out. Jimmy was working on a triple-decker chocolate cone. Ellie stood behind the counter as usual, and her apron was smeared with ketchup, mustard, chocolate, and a lot of stuff Dink didn't recognize. Ellie smiled. Hi, Dink. Butter Crunch, right? Now, Ellie is a worker here at Ellie's diner, so I could go back to the map and look to see where that is. And Ellie's a new character, so I might want to write her down on my notebook as well. Dink shook his head. No, thanks, Ellie. I came to use the phone. Excuse me, but would it be all right if I bought you each a cone? Mavis asked. I was going to buy lunch for Mr. Wallace Wallace anyway. Gee, thanks, Josh said. I'll have a scoop of mint chip and a scoop of pistachio. Oh, you like green ice cream too? Mavis said. She smiled shyly. I'll have the same, please. I like pink ice cream, Ruth rose.